Hello and welcome to the Anfield Wrap. Who's that speaking, you ask yourself? It's not Neil Atkinson. No, it's not Neil Atkinson. It's Rob Gutmann, and we're doing a special Monday Anfield Wrap for you today in the style of what you can only get if you're a privileged subscriber to our Tour Player service. It's called the Transfer Gutter Show, and we have it very regular. I host it very regularly with an array of incredible guests, including the incredible Neil, who's actually an incredible guest for us on today's show. And I've also got Adam Melia and Mo Stewart, with Andy producing. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through all the transfer rumours that have snowballed and accumulated since the window slammed shut on August the 31st. We're going to take stock of where we are now compared to where we were then. Anyway, we're going to go through this in a series of parts and systems. But first, Neil has some stuff to talk about Green King.
Yep, Rob, for the 23-24 season, the Anfield Wrap, sponsored by Green King, where football is more than a game. It's a massive fortnight of sport with the Premier League, cricket and something they call rugby union, all taking centre stage. To celebrate, Green King has given listeners of this podcast 20% off drinks until the 29th of October, an hour before, during and after the sport. All you need to do is download the Green King Sport app. If you've not downloaded it before, you'll even get a free welcome pint. So go to the App Store, go find the app on there, 20% off, and you won't miss a minute of any of the action, some of which will be high quality, the football and the cricket, some of which will be a mess of a sport.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Green King. Okay, I set myself the task of how to even begin starting about the current state of Liverpool's impending transfer business. I suppose we are all naturally looking forward ahead to January. And you can't do that without really taking stock and absorbing what we went through, Adam Melia, in the course of the summer. You spent a lot of it going through it with me. Moaning, yes. You moaned for England, and as did I, as we pleaded and prayed for different midfielders and defenders and what have you throughout the course of that summer. Well, we now know what happened. We got 4 brand new midfielders. We lost, we lost 6 midfielders of the 9 that Klopp cited as being our midfield pool in about the summer of 22. We didn't replace the outgoing Bobby Firmino in attack. We didn't bring in a centre-back, despite fears over the form and future fitness of Matip and Gomez. We also didn't bring anyone to deputise for Trent in the hybrid role that we'd seen come into existence at the tail end of last season. So that's where we found ourselves when the window slammed shut, Adam. You've had a while to reflect on it. You've seen the fruits of their labours or the problems caused by them not getting certain bits of business done. What's your overview of the business at this point in history?
Well, I think there is a really interesting difference between focus in the summer, where we tend, I say we, this is what I do anyway, everything feels quite big picture during the summer, and once the season starts, this is why I always liked it when the transfer window shut just before the season started, just for my own well-being, because I quite like just at that point thinking, here's what we've got. So the fact that here's what we've got point doesn't actually happen until a couple of games in now, but nevertheless, it becomes quite quickly a much tighter focus thing, and I think this is how the team see it as well. They're like, this is us for the season. This is the band. You know, this is the lads, and we will, make the best of it no matter what. So I realised towards the end of the summer of doing quite a few gutter shows with you, as you say, that I was probably moaning more about the summer before than anything that was happening during this summer, because actually what we found was that we'd left ourselves too much to do. Having said that, we did a good job. I thought it eventually turned into a really good transfer window with only one thing, I would say, that there was, you've just named 3. So there was the Trent hybrid role, the extra defensive midfielder, and the extra centre half with the 3. I would say probably, in my mind anyway, I was just after a centre half on the last day. That was like the only thing that I was sort of concerned about at that point was we've left ourselves short there.
And Gravenberch, I think he was last day-ish, wasn't he?
No, I mean, sorry, that was already knowing he was in.
Yeah.
So once it was shut, that was my kind of only regret at that point. So I'm reviewing my own feelings, if you don't mind.
This is what I want you to do.
So I guess what Yeah, as I say, it was more a case of we had left ourselves too much to do, and that was annoying. And I think there's been that once the focus did sort of narrow in, I think it was instantly really such an exciting prospect. Specifically the overhaul of midfield, completely unprecedented in my football watching lifetime, to sort of get rid of all of your starting midfielders basically, and bring in another entire group. So that was the cause for excitement, and we're still watching it sort of shake out as we watch Gravenberch sort of develop, and we sort of think, we're trying to figure out what it is that we're kind of thinking long term for McAllister, and the absolute revelation that's been Szoboszlai. These are, I guess, those are all things which to certain points could have been predicted and were predicted in some ways. Some things did come to pass, some things didn't come to pass. I suppose it's been basically positive in terms of what has come to pass. As I just mentioned, Szoboszlai, the fitness has stayed okay-ish, and we haven't, those sort of papered cracks haven't been exposed yet. So we're in a really good place, and I think that's as much to do with the mentality as anything else. But it does go back to having a really solid and really active transfer window, and yeah, it doesn't excuse the kind of summer that goes before it. I'll reserve the right to moan about that one forever, because it was a farce, really, and it showed some real issues within the club at large. The upper echelons of the club, which we're still, are still some of them unanswered. So. I think as it is, where from a starting point of where we were at the start of the summer, I think it's been a really exciting and 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 maybe. I don't know. I think I might have pushed us up a point.
Well, this is heady stuff from you. So I'll come to you, Mo, for almost like a parallel view. I mean, time, hindsight, whatever you want to say, makes fools of us all, and so much is rosier in the garden than I think it was as we move towards the end of the transfer window. What we know now that we didn't know then, we know that Liverpool won 5 out of 7, and the 8th game is an asterisk game against Spurs, and 5 out of 8 of their opening 8 were away from home. It's a really solid start to the season, with some really good performances and moments in it. That provides a context for everything, really.
It really does.
On top of that, things which we fretted about, well, okay, we brought in 4 midfielders, we got rid of 6, we got rid of these guys like Henderson and Fabinho, who we'd all slated would start 25, 30 games. But what calms it is the proof of puddings, is, as Adam says, is a Szoboszlai here, a McAllister there, signs that Gravenberch is the real deal. What calms things is Matip and Gomez not being injured and being the real deal, and so on and so on.
Yeah, well, I think one thing you have to recognise is when we're talking about in the summer, we are trying to plan, or at least us as fans, or at least me as fans, are trying to plan for every potential bad scenario that can happen. So when we're squad building, we're looking at what we got, we're thinking, okay, well, what happens if that happens bad, and then that, and then that, and then that. And frankly, we've seen that happen quite a few times, so it's not like we're being paranoid by trying to take that into account. But obviously some of those things haven't happened yet, so we've got a little bit more leeway. I do think in terms of the defence, if you'd have told me in June that we'd get 4 90-minute performances out of Joel Matip in a row, I'd have said, are you high? But we got them, and that's something definitely to be celebrated. And if you extrapolate that over the course of the season, that kind of fitness with him and Gomez, that still allows the time and the minutes for a really good young prospect like Jarell Quansah to come in slowly and develop. So we might get to next summer and be like, okay, this guy's developed enough that maybe we don't need another defender. But that's a question we're going to have to answer over the course of the season. I think there's a couple of those that we're going to be answering over the course of this season, which is really going to tell us what we've got now. So, for example, the other one, big one for me, is Stefan Bajcetic, because we don't know where he fits at the moment. I mean, we've seen 72 minutes of him this season, and that's all been at right back. And I think I said 100 million times over the summer that I thought he was going to be the guy who they were looking at to be in and around the sixth position going forward. So at the moment, like you say, with the midfielders, it's clear that we've got some very good footballers. Szoboszlai has come in and shown what he can do. McAllister's really come in and shown what he can do, even if it's in a slightly different position to what a lot of people were expecting to do. But with the others, there is still more to come. Gravenberg I think he's improving in every game, and that's an exciting prospect. I think Endo's starting to find his feet and find his role within the team. And that's going to be the next question. It's going to be, what do they all do? Because another thing we were discussing multiple times over the summer is these guys are all great. Where are they going to play? Who's going to play with what? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And we still haven't answered all of those questions yet. I think Klopp still is trying to work out the answers to some of those questions. And the fact that we're able to do all that working out while still winning football games at the moment is very good. But it's going to come a point where we are really in the business end of some big trophies and every decision is going to matter, and we're going to want to know the answer to some of these questions, I think specifically by the time we get to February 1st. So the next few months are going to be really interesting on that score for me.
Transfer gutter fiends, Neil, see all solutions as being in the transfer market. I know I do, right? Managers routinely say, hang on, it's as important what happens with your existing quotient of players, as Mo's been talking about then. I think what's been heartening has been the alchemy of the new signings with the growing maturity of some of the younger players who was there. I mean, Curtis Jones continuing. Harvey Elliott's only had cameos, but they've been broadly as close to stellar as you can want from a young man off the bench. And as Mo says, Gerald Quance has provided us with something new to think about. We've seen Darwin Núñez, who's still a young player, suddenly look like that he makes sense in our team, and that's a massive plus. It's as much about how the squad reacts to the moves in the transfer market as the transfer market successes or failures itself, I would argue.
Yeah, I think very much so. And I think you can see that through the start of the season that existing players who were very much in the first team picture have taken on a new leadership sort of style role. That seems evident. Salah, Robertson in there as two, sort of Trent Alexander-Arnold himself, as standouts. Then what you've seen as well, I think, is you've seen the new players come in and settle and be able to be made able to do so by, for instance, Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott, so on and so forth, who also see themselves as more senior. And then those players have come in and have sort of, broadly speaking, I think settled quite quickly. So I think it all sort of bodes well. I think there's still a couple of question marks. I think ultimately, if I was, for instance, having the very limited bits of sort of medical knowledge we have, I just sort of wondered if this is a season that you write off a Bajcetic. And you'd almost have in your mind anything we get from him is a bonus. It's not.
I agree.
That's got to be the plan now. And even to the point of, if you can get him back and get him fully proven his fitness, it might not be. It wouldn't surprise me if it's one of them where you think, can we actually get him a good loan 31st of January, where he can go play football for a year, for the rest of the season, and then come back to us sort of ready. I think the only other one where I feel as though he's found it harder than we've anticipated in previous cameos and in pre-season is Doak, who I feel has got himself into a situation where it feels like he feels to me further away from picking him in a Premier League game than I thought he was on the 20th of July.
Do you not think the Gakpo injury sort of cast that into a different focus?
Well, I think it cast, but the focus it cast it into was, do you want him involved at any point in the game against Brighton? And the answer to that was no, I don't. So even when we were, I thought that Núñez was tiring. Ultimately, there's a really good sort of thought experiment I think you can do on Doak, and it's, would you swap him for 2019 Origi? And if your answer is you would swap him right now, not in the long term, what I mean is, would you swap him for would you swap 12 months of Doak disappears out on loan and somehow we just ended up with 2019 Origi? Would you do that? I think the answer is yes, you would. And I think that throws open, therefore, when you are doing the squad build stuff and the tension that managers have to go through between, I've got a young player, I don't want to block his pathway on the one hand, but then on the other, a bit of pathway opens up and the manager goes, whoa, I'm not sure you're walking down that path. And so I think that there's a little bit of a tension there, which I think we could do with resolving in January, possibly. But then you've got to be aware that you resolve it in January, it then comes back in July again. If you do, for instance, send Doak out on loan and he does ever so well, and he's, obviously hugely gifted, so you'd end up not being sure about that. So I think there's a few little questions in there. I think Bajcetic is one. I think Doak is one of the younger players. I think of the ones we bought, people will still feel as though there's a little bit of a question mark around Endo. I don't really think there is. I think you're going to see more and more. I think in the next little run of games, what it is he offers both from the start and off the bench, especially in matches against sides at the bottom of the table, which is where I think you'll actually see him get more league games counterintuitively than the tighter games higher up. So I'm quite, I'm of the 4 that were done in the summer. I think it's gone well. Most of the squad planning, I think it looks like it's gone really, really well. Quansah's genuinely surprised me, and I think it's going. I think that couldn't be going any better. It'd be impossible for it to be going any better. These are all positives, but I think on Bajcetic, on Doak, and on a couple of other little bits and pieces that are knock-on effects, there's still things to answer.
Neil, insert time, I believe.
Absolutely. First up, we've got Danny Smith and Les Wright speaking to me about a fundraiser that they're pulling together. So that is coming right now. Neil Atkinson here with Les Wright and Danny Smith. Danny, who suffered a horrendous attack in the aftermath of the Paris European Cup final back in the, we can now call the summer of 2022. Danny, what happened to you was horrendous. I'm going to ask you to go into a bit of detail about it, obviously being aware that a lot of people suffered a great deal around Paris, but you suffered absolutely enormous trauma.
Yeah. Before the game was bad enough, a lot of us seen what happened, the crushes, getting through the grounds and then at the turnstiles and everything. And during the game, me and my friends, we said we're not going to bring the kids back that way.
Yeah.
So after the game, we said we'll go the Real Madrid end. They're in the celebrating of the European Cup. There won't be any crushing. We get on the metro wherever we need to get away. And we set upon by a gang of mid-20s lads and told them want to fight at first. But yeah, a bit of a Mexican standoff, and then one's just come and hit me with an hammer, just mugged us. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were caught up in similar things. It was shocking.
The randomness of it's dead interesting. You said there you thought afterwards go to Real Madrid end out. Me and the person I was with, we did exactly the same thing, and there was just. It was chaos.
Yeah.
It's hard to put into words what it was like. I mean, without having gone through anything anywhere near as traumatic as what you ended up going through. Like I've had nightmares about what it was like around that ground after the match.
Yeah.
The after the match, everyone's talked about before, but after the match, it was dark. It was carnage. There was people roaming everywhere. There was then all the crushes, and then what happened to you has put you into a situation where you can't work.
Yeah. It's been tough, but I've had tons of support. The club have been amazing. The Liverpool Football Club don't get the credit they deserve, in my opinion. They've been absolutely amazing. I was in hospital for 7 weeks. Tony Barrett and Mono from SOS were at my house the next day. And I've had a ton of support off the club, off the lads, off Les being the rock I've stood on. He's helped me out loads. But it's a bit of a cliche, the Liverpool family, we talk about it, we use that term loosely, but I speak from experience. Everyone has been fantastic and helped me deal with it.
So where we are now is, before I get Les in to do the detail, there's going to be a fundraiser, and that's another example of the Liverpool family wanting to look after its own. You must at times feel like, oh God, they're doing this for me, you know what I mean? But simultaneously, people do it for anyone, and that's what matters.
And a lot of lads will come to Man and see me, and they're carrying stuff around. They're still dealing with it. Lads will come and being upset, and if anyone's suffering, it's triggered a lot of things for a lot of lads, and there's help out there. Try and get help. Speak to your mates about it and everything else, because a lot of people are still walking around with what happened that night. But I pinch myself. I thought, they're doing all this for me. I'm worthy, and I just hope I can pay it forward in the future.
It's 7 weeks in hospital, Les. Everything that's gone on since. He says there that you've been a rock for him through the process. You pulled together with a lot of other people I hasten to add, because that's how it works. This fundraiser on the 17th of November, what can you tell us about it?
Well, we've got one of the lovely suites there at Anfield. We've got like an AV company. We've got some legends. Danny, myself and Mono from the SOS are going to be there doing a little bit of Q&A. just to talk about Danny's experience in a little bit more detail, but also some of the European experiences which have actually led to that, and actually give us the experience to know what to do and actually how to help, how to approach. So Danny's referred to LFC, but there's, you know, people like the Anfield Wrap and all the media groups throughout the Northwest who've actually helped publicise this, because they realise the severity of what we're going through and what we need to do to make a success of it, because Danny has to live and he's unable to work, and through no fault of his own he nearly lost his leg. And so the idea was to get businesses and fans together at an event to support Danny. That's what, you know, stand up for Danny Smith. That's what the hashtag is.
Yeah.
And we basically want businesses to come along and grab a table if they can, write off against charitable expense. Lads and girls, match going Reds. We want as many there as we can. We've got a big room and we want to sell the tickets, because all the money's going to Danny, minus the most minimal of expenses that he actually gets the benefit. And we as a city can actually celebrate the fact that we've supported him.
So you've got a couple of legends there. Do you know who they are?
We know one for certain. The club are coming back to us on the other two.
Okay.
So we're just waiting to hear.
Well, they're good.
No comment. They're all good. They're all good.
No bad ones. And you've got James Pearce, I think, have you, as well?
James, James has been fantastic, not just in terms of his coverage and support of Danny in publicising that through the Athletic, but also the fact that, you know, we're pretty much all volunteering our time and efforts and buying tables of our own, because we can't expect other people to buy tables if we're not prepared to do ourselves. So it really is about supporting Danny.
Yep. And so it's on November 17th. Where do people get the tickets from if they want to come and support?
Right, well, there's an online portal, Skiddle, through Skiddle. If you just type in really the hashtag Stand Up for Danny Smith, companies can contact us via social media as well, where we can tailor a support. If you want to get a table of 10, we can actually come up with something which suits you as an individual or you as a table or a group. So that's really what we're about.
That's what they're about all the way through, and what the whole thing's been about is supporting each other, which is what's gone on, I think, brilliantly. You know, Danny mentioned there the club before, and right the way through every little bit of Liverpool civic society, everyone supported each other after Paris. It's an opportunity to support Danny on November the 17th. If you can, get involved. Do go onto Skiddle, do search for Danny's name. You'll find it all there. Thanks to Les, thanks to Danny, thanks to you for listening.
And so, as I said at the beginning, at the top of the show, we have to inevitably turn our thoughts to January. And in turning our thoughts to January, the elephant, or the world-class Liverpool hero in the room, is Mohamed Salah. Mo, I'll start with you on this one. I want to talk about whether we will talk about the need for still possibly a number 6, or whether the quest for a centre-back goes on, or whether we need to, as Neil spoke about a bit earlier, about whether we need to think about Doak on loan and somebody else in as a 6th forward, those kind of things. But all the conversations are in the context of what happens next with Mohamed Salah. And I know it's tempting for us to go, he's going nowhere. No one wants to sell Mohamed Salah. Of course, no one wants to sell Mohamed Salah. Of course, I hope when
I think you do.
No, I know you think people who say it secretly do.
No, I think you do. I think you're craving it.
No, I don't. I actually don't. I tell you what I do. I would say I'd want to sell him in the summer. But well, let's put it this way. Okay, now as you made me answer the question. I don't think there's a cat and L's chance we get him to sign a new contract. I just don't think that's the case. So I start from that premise. And I know, and I'm going to give you a chance to tell me why I might be wrong on that. But if you work from that view of near certainty, which I have on that, I think you then have to decide, when are you selling Mo Salah? Of course, you do what one wants to sell Mo Salah if you think he won't sign a new contract, because you'd be a fucking idiot, I think, given the presence of the Saudis and what they'll pay, to say we'll just let his contract run down in 2 years and we'll get zilch for him, because I think that would be a disaster on several levels for Liverpool. Okay, I'll start. As you've inserted yourself in this, Neil, I'm duty bound, sorry, to postpone you, Mo, and go to Neil on this.
That's
fine. All right, I tell you what, Neil. I know you want to put the case for him signing a new contract. How do you give me the scenario? Or do you think there's a chance that Liverpool could pull off the extending of the contract? Because if you can convince me and the world of that, and the Liverpool board of that, then I think that's option A.
Yeah, I think there's a few ways in which that can happen. I think the main thing to point out is that Mo Salah will not want to go into semi-retirement.
No,
and that for me is the driving force in question. So.
There's a lot of info out there. Intel, shall we suggest, that he would have taken the deal had Liverpool had enthusiasm for it in the summer, though, for Saudi.
Well, it's possible that might be true, but it also might not be. But I think it would just be such madness for him to go into semi-retirement. He's currently, I would argue, certainly in terms of pure output, but in a number of different senses, I think he's right now currently the best forward in the country. I think he's in better nick than Haaland, who's having a bit of a funny time of it in the absence of De Bruyne. And then you can look around elsewhere and, would you take Saka ahead of Salah purely to play a football match for you tomorrow, not on the idea of where the relevant ages of and are and all that? No, you'd take Salah. And you can go down, you would just take Salah. In every scenario, you would just take Salah. So the idea that he goes somewhere, that he commits to 12 months of getting Liverpool back into the Champions League, which is what he's done when he signs that deal, and as part of all of this, when he decides to continue on through the summer in the first place when the Saudi Arabian thing first came up, and then gets back into the Champions League with Liverpool and then doesn't want to play Champions League football, I just find it a little bit difficult to rationalise in amongst all of this. So I think that's a starting point. I think also he's in a position where he may well want clarity around where we are with the manager and what the manager's up to, because that is going to start to rear its head quite soon as well. I think he may want the option of a moment that suits him and the people who represent him to be able to go to Saudi Arabia. And I think Liverpool could allow they've broken a number of rules for Mo Salah, and another one they could break would be the idea of a very year-by-year time-sensitive release clause, i.e. in July of each calendar year, we will accept this much money. We will just take the money if it's offered for you. But when we get to the 1st of August, if you're still at Liverpool, you're still at Liverpool, so that Liverpool aren't being messed about on the 31st of August or anything like that. I think Liverpool could do that and put that in, and then every year it's down to Salah, and he gets to choose, and Liverpool can go from there. It protects his value on the one hand, but he's got the freedom and the agency if the money comes in from, for instance, there's lots of ways Liverpool can be creative around it. But for me, the main thing is it just would not make any sporting sense to me for the footballer to go. Now, the idea of cashing in because you think that the Saudi project may cease to be, I think you can make a little bit of an argument around, but that argument is now weaker today when it looks like it's being diddled by FIFA for them to get the 2034 World Cup. That's weakened more today than it was even in the summer. So that notion of this might all disappear, so I won't be able to go and do it when I'm 36 is in there. And the last thing for me, it remains, and it's dead interesting, the stuff that came out of the Harvard. The very fact that they collaborated with Harvard, to me, suggests someone who may well see the brand value of Salah be in the direction of something like MLS rather than something like Saudi Arabia in the long term. And Liverpool can help with that as well.
And the revelation about the earning level outside of his base salary was fascinating, wasn't it, in that article?
I think all of this, now don't get me wrong, this is not me saying, Mo Salah's going to stay forever or he's going to stay till he's 36 or this or that. And it may well be in the end the cold, hard commerce of it all works. But I think there's a desire to speak about it as though there is nothing anyone can do. And the money will definitely tell eventually, as though firstly the money is only going to come from one place. I think if you're Salah, you could probably follow Messi in MLS as an argument.
Honestly, I mean, Rob, you know my feelings about the Saudi project all summer because I was saying the same thing, and nothing on that has changed. Obviously, the World Cup bid does mean that long term...
Remind us what your view on the Saudi project was all summer.
Everything Neil said. It's semi-retirement. They're getting 8,000 as a maximum at any game, and it's all well and good from us afar.
Is that really
That's really it.
I saw a picture of a full stadium.
There's 4 teams, and the 4 teams get full stadiums. Every other game. There's 18 teams in the league, though.
So Salah would get full stadiums, it's worth saying, that people would sell out for Salah. Yeah. But the capacity of the full stadiums isn't very big in the other places and all this sort of stuff.
And the competitive nature of it. Yes, you're getting more and more top players, quote unquote. But again, like, it's a league where there's 4 teams you can win. And you could say, oh, well, there's only 4 teams you can win in England. Yeah, but everyone else can get beat by those other teams on a bad day. I don't think that happening there. I don't see the prestige in winning anything over there in the same way over here. Neil's point about the fact that he's worked to get us back to the level and then leave, I don't think that makes sense to me either. And also, to be honest, I've kind of felt like the MLS has suited him a little bit more. Obviously, the people in Saudi see him as the king of that area and it would be massive for them. Mo Salah was on the cover of Time magazine back in 2018. Like, he's looked at America and they've looked at him for a long time. So I've always felt like it suited him better. So for all of those reasons...
Is the money comparable there? I've lost track.
It can be. In terms of you can be the designated player, which means there's 1 or 2 players who get a good salary.
But Messi's not messing about.
No, he's not doing it for the shits and giggles of Miami. Although, I mean, to be honest, you might as well.
And he looks like he's having a great time.
He is having a great time. And Salah is exactly the kind of player who would get that kind of devotion from American fans because he's just like, wow, look at what this guy can do.
Are we showing a Western-centric bias here? by going, hey, we'd all like to live in America more than we would Saudi.
No.
Mo's from the Middle East.
He is, and I'm not saying that he wouldn't settle there. I'm saying that the only reason it wouldn't work for him over there is the competitive element. That's the only thing that I don't think will work for him over there.
Yeah.
With MLS, it's getting bigger, it's getting broader, so you can almost make an argument to say that their competitions are more valuable. But the other thing, going back to Liverpool, and what you were saying about the contract, I think the interesting thing for me here is that the main reason why you normally say, oh, well, you won't give Salah the massive contract he wants is because then everyone else comes in knocking on the door. Well, who's going to come in knocking on the door? Trent's.
Oh no, I agree with that. He's the designated player.
Yeah. Trent's contract's going to get sorted before we get to that point, and he's going to be very well removed. He's going to get lots of money. Everyone else is either not going to get a new contract or they're still earlier on in their development. So I think you can give Salah a big contract without it necessarily causing ructions throughout the rest of the squad.
Yeah, and the other thing is on your Western points, I mean, it's not this show, but it's fair to say that Middle Eastern politics are quite complicated. And we have a bit of a Western point that we just presume, we do the easy line of, well, because of this, you definitely want to go and play in Saudi Arabia. There's tons of evidence.
That's fair.
And that adds another layer to this. Do I think that the likeliest outcome could well be? Do I think that if I would do a percentage bar chart, is the likeliest outcome Salah goes to Saudi Arabia next summer? It probably is. But where some people, e.g. Mr. Robert Gutmann, have got that about 85%, I've got it at like 38%. With lots of other competing things also happening as likely.
America,
if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
there'll be a longer term plan. I think there's also Rob, and I think you're going to have to come to terms with this. There's also a very strong reality that Salah genuinely says, and his representatives say, no, we're seeing the contract out.
Oh no, I'm
and I think that's the one that competes with me more than anything else. They just say, no, we're doing another year at Liverpool, and then we're going to weigh our options up, and that becomes the thing that happens next season. And I think that could well be the likeliest outcome, that he's not committed to anywhere else. That even if Liverpool would take an offer from somewhere else, Salah goes, no, I'm seeing this contract, it's a good contract, I'm seeing it out and I'm enjoying playing for Liverpool. At which point Liverpool are in a bit of a bind, not least because the manager, we'd all be going, another 12 months of Mo Salah, whereas you'll be going, but the money. But the fact is that if Salah's not prepared to decide to move, which I think is what will happen next summer, then I think you get in a situation where you can keep saying, well, the money as much as you want. The reality is that the player's staying at Liverpool.
And call me crazy here, and you probably can, but
crazy Mo.
Is the money for Salah that we would get, the value of Salah, less important if we feel like we have already replaced him? So, i.e., if we are going the Stoke loan, look at someone else move in January, or maybe even in the summer, and then suddenly Salah's like, no, I'm going to run down my contract. And it's like, okay, well, we've got another 12 months to work out what our forward line is going to look like. Because there's a paradox there, because it's more important and less important to the money. Because one, you go, well, he's dispensable, so fucking let's get the money in. Or you could go, well, we're less stressed about it. But is it easier to buy the Salah replacement when Salah's already in the building, or when we've just sold him for 150 million, everyone's putting the prices up?
Right, I'll come to you on this, Adam, but I have to have my tuppence worth because I'm being labelled here. One of the reasons, you put it at 85%, I think he'd be gone next summer. I don't quite put it that high, but I definitely put it past 70% so that he'd be gone by next summer. I've said for a while, I think this is the last season we'll be watching Mo Salah, and I think that's still more likely than not, and more than 51% likely. And one of the reasons for it, actually, as again, there's lots of things you can look at in two ways, is the fact that it's not all just about what Mo wants or doesn't want. I think what you've said, Neil, about the contract running down, the prospect of them getting nothing for what will he be 33, a 33-year-old at that age who they'd want to have replaced anyway by that stage, possibly. I think that's got to loom large. And that's why I think there's a danger. And I don't want him out the door, because I totally agree with you about his status in world football at the moment. I desperately want to keep seeing Mo Salah play. I am preparing the ground and my own sanity for the fact that I won't be able to see Mo Salah play forever. I've been through this with many heroes. They're not there forever, unfortunately. Maybe he'll come back as our manager one day and I'll cry a little bit if that happens, because that'll be wonderful. But Adam, we've all given our tuppence here. Where are you landing on the side of it? It's not about what one wants to happen, I suppose. I think it's how do you think this plays out with Mo Salah?
I think it's really, really difficult. So before Saudi appeared, I mean, as a option for footballers, which was hugely lucrative for clubs, I always thought that Mo would be most likely going to Real Madrid. I don't know why. I just thought that was the one that he fancied in his future. From when he first joined us, I thought he would probably. That
a swan song at Real Madrid, though.
No. I think I thought when we sold Mane. This is going back a while. So I thought that when we sold Mane, at the start of that season, which ended with us selling Mane, I thought probably Mo's going to go at the end of this season, probably go to Real Madrid, but that hasn't looked likely for a while for loads of different reasons, and I sort of feel like there's a lack of a super club somewhere, which would have been most likely destination. You know, I think
the Barcelona PSG
So
thing's
Barcelona,
not quite talking. PSG's not quite talking Barcelona on the knees.
Exactly. So they were the two that I was going to say. So you know that for me, Neil's first point is the one that I keep coming back to. He's too good. He's too good to go into semi-retirement at this point, and I think that a point I've made a few times. I think he's like Ronaldo levels of fitness, and I think he's going to stay at the top level for a good while. And I think he thinks that too. It's predicting something that's impossible because there are players that have drop-offs after signing a big contract, blah blah blah. I just don't see it with him. I think there's another big move potentially for him. But that club just doesn't look likely. Like neither for one reason or another, I sort of don't see PSG or Barcelona being that club.
I think PSG might be.
So maybe PSG would be. So I mean those possibilities. And I suppose PSG, I sort of discount them in my mind just because I think they're rubbish. But like that's silly, isn't it? And Barcelona I discount because of financial madness. But they've been having financial madness for years. They still sign good players every summer, so they are possible, and that's why I mentioned them. And I think there's definitely a possibility of him, as Neil said, running his contract down. I can imagine that. More than I can imagine a new contract, I think, although there might be a clever new contract that we can do. I think that your desire for £300 million might not be the most likely thing. Like, and
I don't think we're getting that, by the way.
No, I know, but I think that there was definitely an excitement from everybody when you when you sort of start thinking about what that could mean, not 300 million but 200 million and what that could actually mean for the future of the club kind of thing. So I sort of just think that was probably a one summer thing, and we could have got that for him this summer, and then every summer after that. I just think every summer's really different. Like who would have foreseen Saudi popping up like they did this summer, and who knows what the next thing like that will be. So I think that's why it's really, really difficult to predict. And I will, I guess, go back to what I thought, which was he has another big few years at a big club. That club might be Liverpool.
I hope it is Liverpool. I think next summer I would probably rule out PSG and Barcelona. PSG have basically just gone, we're getting rid of the superstars. We've got rid of Ramos, we got rid of Messi, we got rid of Neymar. They've gone with an all-French front line with Colomboani and Ousmane Dembele. They have to give that at least a year, unless they're an absolute disaster, which they could still be. So I don't think PSG are going to be in the running. Barcelona, maybe not this summer. But if he stays an extra year, the summer after, I think Barcelona becomes a very live possibility. Yeah. Mainly for free, but we've all seen them bend heaven and earth to get the player that they want. Lewandowski's going to be needing to be moved by the end of next season, I think. So he's the kind of caliber player that they would go after to replace him. They've got the young Lamine Yamal who's coming through. They've maybe got Ansu Fati, who they're going to be selling at some point in the next 12 months. So they've got moves that they can make. I feel like Barcelona is the kind of place that probably does suit Salah in as much as it's a big club, it's a nice place to live, there's lots of other commercial possibilities around.
He can imagine himself lifting the Champions League in a Barcelona.
You see, I want to pour some water on this, cold water, and then let Neil have the last word on the Salah thing before we move towards a part 3. If you rewound 6 months or so before the Saudi thing really reared its head as changing the course of football history in a sense, when it looks like it could, I would have said Salah is going to see out his career, the meaningful part of his career at Liverpool. That's a given. He's shown an inclination to break records. He signed that contract in the good faith that he would play out as the meaningful part of his career as a Liverpool player, and that he had signalled in that he wasn't ever going to be tempted by a Real Madrid, a Barcelona, or a PSG. That's what I feel he'd signalled by signing that contract, and by Liverpool giving a contract that took him towards 34. And I still think that actually. It's just the Saudi thing that queers the whole pitch. I don't know, Neil, where do you... these two gentlemen have brought in, I don't know, a fourth dimension that maybe one of the Spanish giants is a genuine, likely-ish option for Salah. Or do you think it's Liverpool or Saudi?
No, I think that everything's live. And I think that one of the things that the missed part of this is, I think Adam's point around the level of his fitness and Ronaldo levels of fitness. And this is the difficulty in that's an exceptionally difficult thing to judge. Like, we can think it today, but the world might look very different in 4 weeks' time if he begins to pick up one or two niggling injuries, at which point you do begin to go yourself, well, and also internally it's easier for Liverpool to go, well, but the flip side of that is just from what we've seen at the start of the season. Salah looks in great nick and he's brilliant at football and he's changing the sort of football that he is, and he's showing the capacity to change the sort of football that he is. And then you begin to go, hang on, he's actually been changing the sort of football that he is for 18 months, because not only is he absolutely brilliant at football, but I think he's also a really smart fella. And that's another sort of facet of this as well, which makes it difficult. So I think it's a complex one. I really do. And I think that it's been reduced, I think, in a lot of minds to Saudi money or nothing else. Whereas I think it is more complicated than that. And I think just, if we've achieved one thing with this conversation, I actually hope it's put front and centre for people the idea that it is more complicated than the way in which I think a couple of mostly, honestly, genuinely, week in, week out, very respectable media outfits wanted to reduce it to Saudi or nothing from about the 20th of August because it was the last big story in town and it was going to stretch to the 7th of September, and we all need those clicks.
Well, the Saudis were pushing the story.
Yeah, they were as well, but there wasn't that much critical thinking done in and around it in mainstream environments, where there is a lot of the time now when you look at the way in which even transfers are talked about by outlets that love transfers, there just ceased to be a lot of critical thinking on Salah. It just basically became, Liverpool should take the money, Salah should take the money, everyone's always obsessed with the money, and everyone wanted people to keep paying attention to this thing, even though there was no way on earth Liverpool were going to sell him between the 1st of September and the 2nd of September and the 7th of September. But everyone wanted to push the point over and over again, and I think that introducing critical thinking to the conversation is really, really important, and it is not a digital thing. It's not one thing or one other thing. I think there's a lot going on, and I think there'll be a lot going on for Salah as well. There'll be a lot going on for his representatives, but simultaneously, he just looks like a man who's absolutely loving his football. When I had a couple of concerns about that as well, he doesn't get the captaincy. This is why you don't take the fucking penalties off him, by the way. Under any circumstance. Messi's shit at penalties, and Messi gets to take penalties wherever he goes. Messi could miss 10 consecutive penalties, and no one takes the penalties off Messi. You don't take the penalties off him.
Did you see Darwin's penalty for Uruguay?
Yeah, but you don't take the penalties.
Very funny how good that was.
You don't take the penalties off him under any circumstances.
You can take them when Mo's been subbed off.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, don't worry, I'm not taking them off you either, Mo.
I think we're subbing him off.
You don't sub him off.
We're going to call that it for part 2. We're going to, in part 3, you're going to enjoy this because we're going to talk about the reality.
Should we do names in part 3?
We are going to.
I love doing names.
We are relentless. I know you're going to be made to talk about names who might replace Mo Salah as well, Neil. But first, I want you to do an insert for me.
Yeah, we've got a really good stuff. Matt Parrish from the LFC Foundation chatting away about what they've been up to recently. Just a little bit of a check-in in the international break, seeing what the Foundation's up to. Loads and loads of good work happening all over the place, and Matt is letting us know about that now. Matt Parrish from the Foundation, indeed. And Matt, we talk a lot and we get excited, understandably, about a lot of what we get to see, almost what we can call front of house with the Foundation, where there's the events and there's the game and there's all the bits and pieces. But I think it's important to, at times, ask you the questions about actually what happens with that money once it's being raised. So what's the Foundation been able to support, both in terms of resource and in terms of cold hard cash recently?
Yeah, good question. I think the day-to-day, if you like, we're now something like 100 full-time staff, and the big thing about that is that most of those are delivery staff, so probably 80% of those are boots on the ground, and of those there's only, and people often think of us as a we were just discussing the fine football that's in this room here, but they think they're football coaches, but that is part of what we do, but it's not all of. So around, it's only 40% of our staff are football and sports coaches, the rest are youth workers, mentors, educators generally. So that looks like something like about 170 different sessions a week. That might be in a school, that might be in on a ballpark, that might be in some other community setting. So that's, I suppose that's, if you like, the bigger picture piece across the board. We've started doing work. A lot of people didn't necessarily know that it was the case, but the Red Neighbours Club's CSR team was actually a club department that's now come together with a foundation to allow us to do more. So that's been picking up, and we'll start to expand some of the adult health, walking football stuff, socialisation work, and the food poverty work. So it's been quite busy.
It's quite busy. I want to talk about that idea of delivery first and foremost, because I think part of what the foundation wants to be, you mentioned Red Neighbours there as well, is an active partner within the community in Liverpool, but also in the chosen spots around the world. It's not just, you know, the idea that the money comes through and you just drop it off in a bag and then disappear. It's about constant delivery, isn't it? That's what you want the foundation to be since you've been in charge of it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think you and I have spoken about it before, Neil, that I think there's the need in our city region is massive. You know, we talked about it's obviously an amazing place to live and work, but there's pockets of significant need in every part of the Liverpool city region. I felt from when I came here nearly 5 years ago now that it was important that we were relevant in those areas, but not just, to your point, not just dropping in, doing a little bit and going, but to either be delivering there on a regular basis or be funding partners to deliver in those areas, or both. I think the second part is that a lot of club foundations, because they're quite sort of big beasts and the badges are big, and ours is bigger than most, if not all, you could argue. If we go into an area, we can perhaps draw funding and eyeballs and awareness away from other really good organisations that are doing stuff in those communities. So we've tried to do it slightly differently. We try to work in partnership wherever we go. An example of that is our community hubs. So we wanted, as I said, we want, and we're not there yet, to be relevant in all of the areas of highest need of the 6 boroughs of the Liverpool City region. So what we've done is, I think you're aware of our home, if you like, is at Anfield Sports and Community Centre. Yeah. A goal kick away from the stadium. But we don't own that. We're an anchor tenant, and we work in partnership with the charity that run it. We've looked to replicate that model across the region. So we work the Brunny in Bootle, Tiber in Toxteth, Northwood Centre, the Hive, and the importance of that is they're all different. They're all unique to their communities. And the offer from those centres is slightly different, depending on the needs in those centres. And that's something we're looking to grow and expand. So we would like to be doing that from a site in St Helens. We'd like to be doing it from a site in Horton. So it's just a different way of working. I think we have to be conscious that, as I said, the badge is big. If we can bring that to the party, and then all of the groups can bring their expertise to the table, we can have a far greater impact.
Part of this though means that you're going to end up with an enormous amount of stakeholders on a continual basis, and stakeholder management is in and of itself a thing. I don't mean management in a keeping people away way, in terms of keeping people informed, keeping them involved, getting the best out of them. I mean, that must be a massive part of your job day to day, with a couple of the team's job day to day, is keeping what is a huge various group of stakeholders, keeping them not just involved, but genuinely being able to be active and supportive as well. Yeah,
and I think, look, and a genuine challenge we have is to try and retain focus because of that. And I think because you're the charity of, arguably the biggest football club in the world, there's a lot of asks. Most of them, if not all of them, are really genuine and have got a lot of value. But you have to be prepared to say no, and that's actually quite hard, and it's a skill. It's not always a skill that I'm that great at. So, and I think then making sure when you are working with partners, they're the right partners. They deliver. I think that's especially the case. We're looking at international work. We've talked before about I don't think we should be ashamed of the fact that we're the charity of a global football club. Yeah, and we've got supporters around the world. There's need around the world. So what we're looking to do there is primarily, we look to work, as an example of the partnership bit, we look to work with a trusted partner rather than us putting feet or boots on the ground in country, which is hard. We do that in the US because we've got, obviously, the club ownership is a little bit easier to do it. But I've been very fortunate. I've just come back from Tanzania, looking at a project that we've part funded in the Mara district of Tanzania, which works in over 40 schools, primarily around education for girls and young women and their empowerment and getting them to stand up for their rights and to improve their life chances. So it wouldn't have been right for us to go in and try and deliver that. We would have spent a lot of money and wasted a lot of money to try and set up there ourselves. So we work with Right to Play to deliver that. I know you've seen the work that we do with Right to Play in Thailand.
In Thailand, yeah.
So the same model. So we working with a partner that shares our values. We have to do a lot of work around the due diligence there. But once we've got that, as you say, we've got shared vision, shared goals. You've got to be prepared to have a little bit of a toe-to-toe occasionally. It doesn't, every great relationship isn't always smooth, is it? So we have that, but accepting that if you've got the same shared vision and what you want to get out of it, then generally it works. And I think that's the same here. All of those community hubs I just mentioned, they're all really different. So the Brunny in Bootle has been it's a youth club that feels like a youth club I might have attended when I was a kid. They've got it's a real traditional youth club, but they do some quite innovative work as well. Super supportive of young people with additional needs. The Northwood Centre in Kirby is a really small centre. Also do some amazing work. They've got a real focus on older people. The Hive in Birkenhead is probably one of the most modern youth hubs I've ever seen. So they're all really different. But if you acknowledge that, and then we bring what our strengths are. So one constant across all of those, the delivery from the foundation perspective, is our employability work. Because I think, again, using that badge as a tool to engage young people, and then try and signpost them into the sort of positive destinations to, either be that employment, training, skills. But again, some of the other offers from some of those centres will be very different depending on the needs of that particular community.
So recently there's been some work that people have seen, quite a high profile way, Kip on the Cop. It feels as though it was a success. Did you feel it was a success for the foundation?
No, definitely. We had no idea what it would be like. I've been fortunate enough to be involved in similar sort of events. So we can't say we were the first to do it, and Everton have done a really successful one for the last few years. I know Tranmere have done one. I think theirs was also called Kip at the Cop. But I did one when I worked at Burnley. But it sold out the first evening. We put it on. I think we had 170 people. We tested the water. We could go bigger. I think we could probably do double that and still be comfortable. It's raised a good amount of funding. I think it's raised over 65k and counting. You're still able to donate up until the 31st of October. Little plug there. It enables us, a good example, that will directly, half of it will fund our employability programme for young people that have experienced homelessness, and half of that will go directly to Liverpool Homeless Football Club, independent charity to ourselves, do some amazing work in our city. And
it's a good example, that, isn't it, of how you can how you can work with the funding, and you can do it explicitly up front. You can say up front, this is how this is going to operate, and you're able therefore to work with, as I say, that stakeholder, that partner on the one hand, and on the other hand work through your other selected partnerships moving forward on employability. That's how you want this to work.
Yeah, and I think the key for me is, and what myself and my colleagues, but also our trustees have also always been really strong about, is I think sometimes, ultimately, if you're putting a quid into a charity, you want to know where it's going.
Yeah.
You don't really want it to be paying my salary, as important as that is, but you want it to be going to where the need is. And so what we'll always say is we'll be up front, and we'll say, so from Kip at the Cop, that's a great example. There's no top slice on that. If it's 65k, if it ends up being 70k, but that'll go 50% to Liverpool Homeless Football Club and 50% to run that employability programme. So the reason we can do that, in fairness, is that because we've got so many different activities going. I think we're fortunate. You mentioned it a minute ago, where there's not that many football clubs, certainly in England and the UK, that can run a home legends game, and we can't guarantee we sell out, but we're as good as the last few years. I think that the passion from our supporters to come and see the former players, to come to Anfield, it's a good family day. The standard's pretty strong. But that gives us a real advantage in terms of actually then being able to be able to support lots of causes, but also to actually make a difference. And I think being able to say to supporters that money, your £5 for a ticket or £10 for a ticket or whatever, will go to support a worthwhile cause, either locally or overseas.
Next thing is, you did something that looked like a lot of fun with Mo Salah.
Yes.
How was that? Because the idea of working with Mo just blows my mind, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, well, to be honest, we've been doing some work recently. Obviously, during COVID, we got great support from Melwood, as was, and then the AXA, in terms of we always had support then got support during COVID, and a lot of it was virtual, understandably. And then we've been just getting back to the normality of getting the guys and the women's team players out into the community again. So we have a list. Myself and my colleague Forbes met with Jurgen. He's one of our ambassadors. Sat down with him during the closed season. He's super supportive of it. How can we do it? This is what we got, and we got the opportunity to present to the whole first team squad. Forbes is based at the training ground 1 day a week. So one thing for us, as part of that, is for him to get to know the players, get to know what they're interested in. So they're not just, we don't feel as though we're just pulling them out to a venue because they're there. Mo was an unusual one because our colleagues in the comms team got that Mo's available. He wants to do a session. So that programme that Mo visited was actually one of our programmes for refugees in Liverpool. And asylum seekers in Liverpool. So we, across the region again, we're running about 15, 16 sessions a week now. I've just come from Anfield Sports Community Centre where there was a sports session going on. I didn't play because it looked fairly quick and far too skillful for me. But
I played against them. They absolutely battered us.
Oh God, it was full on. So we run mainly football sessions to engage, and then what we look again to do is try and feed the young, mainly young men on the programme into employment and training programmes. But then we work with other partners, Liverpool Regional Mosque Network, Islamic Relief. We work with them during to breaking the fast event to Liverpool Welcomes. We held an event at St George's Hall where we got families together as well. So you got some of the refugee groups are living in hotels and other settings across the city, so to try and bring it together and build a sense of community. So Mo came down, met one of those groups. He was able to talk. He's got that real sort of understated, almost sort of quite shy way about him, where he just spoke openly about his journey. We think Mo Salah. We think of Mo Salah at Liverpool. He's been on a journey. He hasn't been in England that long, and how he's yes, he's worshipped it, but some of the struggles he had, some of the challenges, and I think for those young men to meet Mo Salah and for him to just talk to him almost one-on-one. He spoke to the group, spent a bit of time. Slight challenge we had as our staff for Semi and Aura as well, everyone. But no, look, for us to be able to have, like we said, the power of Mo Salah visiting a session, and so you've got that one group of 18, 20 participants there, but it's that ripple effect of, you guys talking about us talking about it, and and I think it's genuine. That was a one-off. That was him saying, "Look, I fancy doing something." That wasn't right, Mo, come and do this for us. That was him genuinely saying, and then it was, these are the events we've got going on. What do you fancy? It doesn't do any harm to be able to offer that.
You said before about the size of the badge, the size of the player, and all that sort of stuff. It all comes in as one. What have you got coming up for people to keep their eyes out for in the run up towards the end of the year? Yeah, so last week we held a charity gala ball at Liverpool Cathedral in partnership with Alder Hay. Raised just shy of £1 million, £960,000. Slightly skewed, admittedly, because someone pledged 500k, which is brilliant, to Alder Hay for them to complete work on the rooms of the new neonatal centre and the incubators there. So amazing. So the funding from that pledge will be split between the two charities. We're going to use ours to develop our MOVE programme, which is our programme supporting. Started off, we focused it just on young people with cystic fibrosis. Now we've expanded it to work with young people with respiratory issues generally. Because it's one of those classic things, I think, with cystic fibrosis, with asthma, sometimes young people, parents are understandably concerned that physical activity is a bad thing. It's not, it's a good thing. It's not just us cracking on and running sports sessions, we're doing it with the physios from Alder Hay, so it's managed and it's appropriate. So that was massive. It's the first charity ball we've done since 2018, so it's before I came. Some setting, the Anglican Cathedral, and we had Gary Barlow. Can't have everything.
No, but the amazing thing, the amusing thing for me is I had to follow him on stage. So we had Gary Barlow singing, and then I had to get up and say thank you everyone at the end. So, but that's another good example. Gary Barlow gave his time for free. He's a Liverpool fan, and so that side of things, that speaks to that pool. So that was a big event where hopefully, fingers crossed, he says, be announcing our March 24 Legends game back end of this month, start of next. And then as we run up, we've got Operation Christmas Magic and working with partners across the city region to try and support as many people in need at that time as we can. So busy few months.
Excellent. Come back in and tell us about Operation Christmas Magic when we get closer to.
Will do.
Excellent stuff. Been an absolute pleasure. Matt Parrish, CEO of the foundation, to find out about all the excellent work, which is genuinely very complicated.
Okay, I think it is time to talk names. And I think we're going to start off, and I don't want it to be the whole subject, because there are other names we need, or other positions we need to discuss. But in the unlikely event of Mohamed Salah moving on in January, or even next summer, names are coming to the fore. Adam, this week, again, Leroy fucking Sane. I mean, just doing I actually really, really like Leroy Sane as a player, but he's 28. He got twatted in the face by Sadio Mane for a good reason, I'm going to imagine. And I don't think Bayern are going to want to sell him easily. We've also been linked to Neto, who I absolutely love, but he loves an injury and he doesn't love a goal as much. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly see us getting either of these. I guess I really, really like Leroy Sane, and I sort of think he's become weirdly underrated. Like, he was the best player in the league for a while, I think, for City, and then I guess probably they dropped him like a hot potato. But it was the speed of which he was kind of like injured and then gone. It's sort of made it turned him into this underrated player, but you know, he's now playing in a team with an embarrassment of riches, as Bayern Munich always do, and that maybe makes him sort of fade slightly into the background. But yeah, I think he
scored 6 and 7 this season.
He's a great player.
Fact fans,
and I would love to see us signing him. If I thought there was kind of is he getting on a bit? Do Bayern need to shift players on? Sort of value appears. It's not unthinkable. It's not unthinkable that there might be some. There's conversations between Liverpool and Bayern as well. You know, it sort of seems to have opened up into a bit of a vein where we can do some work a little bit. So, yeah, I would like it. I sort of don't maybe think it's one I see as being. Yeah, you know, if we're talking about Salah replacements, I don't think that's the kind of thing we're going to be doing as Plan A. You know, I see much more, and I would say probably the same for Neto as well. I would say that either of those things, which I would say is player who's been great and maybe is seen as being slightly off the boil, but we still think has got a few good years in the Sané vein. That's something we do if there's value, or Premier League player, especially for Wolves, who can make the step up. We think in Neto's case. I just don't think that's the kind of Plan A that we would have that we would have around replacing Salah. I think there's kind of a level above, which is where Salah was, which is going to be players who play for clubs for which we like the style of, who we think are ready to make who are already established and have played. You know, Klopp mentioned 150 games. That was a funny moment in the summer, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. When he said FSG want 150 games. Somebody who we think is going to make blockbuster numbers happen, but somehow is under the radar of clubs who can pay more money than us. So yeah,
Mr. Captain Names here, Neil.
Yeah, love Neto, and I think
what
also.
What about his goals? Are you?
So I think I think it's a little bit scalable. I think also he's been playing when he's been fit. It's worth saying that his last proper seasons were almost 2 years ago, where he got a run of games, and it was in a bit of a Wolves side that just doesn't score that many goals full stop. Yeah. So I think that there's a little thing in that. I saw him score a great goal against Luton for Wolves this season, and his all-round output is remarkably high. It's worth saying that at the minute he's down as, you know, having however many assists he's got. He should have another one for the goal for the one against us, for instance. You know, I mean, a lot of the assists are all. I'm always suspicious of assists, but a lot of them are on a plate assists. It's worth really saying that, you know, in there as well. And I also think that, going back to when we signed Nunez, I think there's a little thing where Nunez is sort of Salah's replacement, and I'd seen his move to a bit more of a number 9-ish shape makes me think that could well be the case. And if you sort of follow that through, it means that we're actually quite well stocked, because Nunez is backed up by Jota in there as well, and Gakpo can play through there. And if Gakpo's a different type of number 9, but Nunez and Jota I think are penalty box number 9s when they play there. I think Jota's got more to his game when he plays out elsewhere. But I love Neto. I think he's great. That's not to say. Yeah, I think Wolves would be mad to sell him in January. So I think that's...
Or even next summer, though.
But I think next summer you just almost get to the point where there'll be an offer that's so big that, and if you're Wolves, you need to follow the thing of you being Wolves, and you've got to follow it through. So if he gets a year's fitness, see what the numbers look like at the end of that. But I think he's a fabulous footballer. I think Sané's great, but I think that there's obviously a couple of questions, and also he's about to turn 28, and he's had a history of a little bit of injury. So I think there'll be something that's a bit more varied. But I don't think Neto's mad, and I also thinking Liverpool will continue to have the right-hand side forward be the focal point of their attack isn't necessarily the case. And I think that's where, again, you don't want to just get sort of stuck on that thinking all the time.
I mean, you have to remember that when we signed Mohamed Salah, we were thinking that, but we were thinking that guy was going to be Sadio Mane.
Yeah.
So we thought we were buying a guy who was going to supply Sadio Mane, and we got this. Yeah. So that's got to be put into context. I agree with what Neil said around Núñez becoming the focal point, which I do think changes what you're after from your right forward. You're after a guy who's going to be able to make good decisions when he's in a good place, but when he's in space, can still score goals. Sané is playing his best form for Bayern at the moment, partly because he's now got a guy called like Harry Kane around, Jamal Musiala around him to kind of take some of the space away. He's in the middle of contract discussions. That's the only reason this link's come up. He's not leaving. Neto, personally, my feeling is that we're on a bit of a watching brief with Neto, as in we're like, if he makes it through this season unscathed, then we're going. Because his numbers are already increasing. And like what I was saying before about, rather than being someone who scores goals, it's like, what do you do when you get the opportunity? So he's already nearly had as many 90s this season as he had last season, by the way.
Yeah.
And his shot on target percentage has jumped from 17 to 41. So that's a significant amount. And again, shot on target is the kind of thing where it's like, okay, if you're in space and you're hitting the target, that's good. And the fact that that's increased by such a large amount, if you extrapolate that over the course of the season, then that's getting close to the leap that Adam was talking about. And then he becomes a much more viable option.
What's his best side, though, out of left and right? Obviously, we're considering right. I mean, plays right a little bit more.
He's
than
played
left?
more right this season than left.
Right.
This
Played
season
left
more
against
right
us,
than left.
didn't he?
Played left against us.
Yeah.
Played more right. He's played basically 690s worth of minutes from the right-hand side this season.
But the point is that he was very effective on both.
Yeah.
Which is really important to have, I think. If you're looking at the main striker being the man in the centre, having people who can go either side around him is even more important, particularly since we do seem to have a lot of guys for over there and less for over here. I'd be surprised if we were looking at buying the full Salah replacement in January, because there's going to be very little value in it. Any player good enough is going to be playing probably for a team who are still fighting for things and are not really going to want to let them go.
We are talking a parallel universe where Liverpool have so much money from a ludicrous deal that they can overpay to force the issue, though. That's the only thing I would caveat with.
But okay, all right, so if we're going down that road, then the guy who I'd place above the two you've mentioned is Mr. Diaby, who I thought would have been alive last season. But now he's come to the Premier League and shown that he can do it in the Premier League, then he goes up a level. If you ask me of all of the stocks of right-sided forwards out there, he's the guy who I'd be targeting.
And what do you, we were talking about him a little bit in the break before, Mo, but Adeyemi, I was... So when we think about jump-ups, I sort of have in my head somebody like a Neto or even a Moussa Diaby. They're already in the Premier League. Then, unless we have sold Salah, then another club in the Premier League, probably Chelsea, are going to be paying like loads more money than us. So that's why I end up thinking, well, what's happening in kind of the Bundesliga? And that was why we were talking a little bit about Adeyemi before. What do you think about him in that same?
I think, again, he's a talented footballer. And the thing about him is that his value might be kind of lessened by the fact that he's going through a bit of a tough time. And Dortmund themselves are going through a bit of a tough time. They are having the hangover of a lifetime after coming within 8 minutes of winning the league and then still managing to mess it up.
It's like they're wondering, what are we?
And then, and then they lose their best player, and then they watch him go off into the stratosphere, and then suddenly they're like, oh, God, we've got to deal with these Bayern lads again. So, yeah, they're in a bit of a malaise at the moment, and they're not sure if the manager's going to stay, so they're not sure who's going to be in, if they get a new manager in, who's going to be where in the pecking order, who's going to be where in the formation. So it's one of those where he could be gettable at a better rate because of all of those things. I still need to see more from him at a club like Dortmund. Like, he was very, very good at Salzburg level. He was a superstar, the kind of guy you think, okay, keep an eye on this kid. I want to see, when you see someone move up a level, you want to see that their play move up a level with it. He hasn't matched that yet for me. We might see it over the course of this season. I don't know.
Okay, I want to move it on a position now to the position we were obsessed with throughout the summer, midfield. The rumours are that Liverpool would retain their interest in Andre Trinidad, playing for Fluminense at the moment. He didn't move to Liverpool in the summer, if people recall, because he was his club was still in the Copa Libertadores and wouldn't sell at any cost. Supposedly, the fee being talked about was 25 million. Ian Doyle at the Echo has said Liverpool are very much still thinking about Andre. Arsenal, apparently, rumours have it, are coming into the mix. Neil, thinking about Andre and the number 6 position, it's a different. There feels like there's a different set of emphases on it now to the way we think about the summer. Simply because we've brought players in who've been successful in midfield, and we've seen young midfielders step up a level. So whilst it's clear we do need a number 6, there's a sort of competition for places issue a little bit, I would argue. I'm not saying this is not a reason to buy him. I very much would like us to buy him. But you kind of think, so if he comes in, it's to play, and then there's only two positions left for quite a lot of good lads. Don't worry, I've got a major hang-up about this, but it's slightly more complex, I think, than it might have been.
It is, but I think that's a different conversation when you're playing Champions League football. And I think that's
Fair.
really worth remembering. The point of this is that we want to get back to, we want to win the league, and we should be thinking about winning the league, and then we should be thinking about winning the league and the Champions League. That's the job.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's a different.
I think potentially write Thiago off in your mind and then see whether you still feel like that.
Well, I don't write Thiago off in my mind.
I'm just as a thought experiment.
No, but I think that's thinking about next season, and I'm with that 100%. I still think that this season there'll come some sort of run of 22 games where Thiago will start 17 of them, and everyone will be going, "Oh my God, where's this come from?" But I would, for this season, in a practical squad building sense, to go back to my earlier point around Doak, you can make it around Bajcetic as well. There's an argument that, for instance, if you could get Andre in January, you let Bajcetic go somewhere, maybe Leicester, where you say you're
let Thiago go to Barcelona for 4 million.
I don't think Thiago. I think you cannot underestimate how much Thiago loves living in Liverpool. No, he might love living in Barcelona as well. And it's possible Barcelona could
but
be
he's
the
out
one.
of contract, unlike Bajcetic.
At the end of the season, he is. But I think there's they're about to have a baby. He loves the foundation. I think you'll have to get Thiago out with a cleaver. To be honest with you, so the contract thing's a separate thing, and that'll happen next summer
on a pay-to-play deal.
Something could happen there where I actually think it is plausible.
Baby deal.
But that's one side. My point is more, there's room for Andre to come in. Then it's different when you get to the last 16 of the Europa League, because you want to win it and you fancy it, and then you're in the last 8 of the Europa League and you want to win it and you fancy it, and we don't know where we are in the domestic cups. My point is there's room for everyone. And there'll be room for everyone moving forward into the following season as well, when you're back into the rhythms of, we want to put a really good team out on a Wednesday and then a really good team out on a Sunday. That's where you'll end up. So for me, if Liverpool can do it, I think it's dead interesting the footballers on the fringe of breaking into the Brazil team, because that puts him in the class of 2 footballers who in different ways people have rated over the last 18 months in Casemiro and Guimaraes. That's who he's competing with for a place playing for Brazil. That's the level of him at the minute. I think he's, as a footballer, clearly coming to the boil. His team, they made the final, didn't they?
Yeah.
So he's that's a major achievement. It's worth pointing that out as well. And then it is this idea of him coming in and stepping up, and he may well be. I think the thing is, even if he comes in, not least because he's 5'8", everyone will go, "Well, you still haven't solved the number 6 thing." And I think that we're going to have to sort of cop for the fact that I think that Liverpool are looking to do it a little bit differently, whether we like it or not, because they can't buy Rodri.
Sorry, I was just going to say that same thing. Essentially, I think the world where we buy a number 6 and then he plays all of the big games and all of the games,
and he looks like one.
Yeah, it's gone. And I think we've seen that this season. I think what we've seen is we're trying to find different solutions to the same problem. People have been a little bit obsessed recently with McAllister and how it's like, it doesn't work with him. Why is he doing that? And it's like, because we're still looking at it as him being the lone 6. When he was doing the job that we're asking him to do now for Brighton, it was as a combination with Caicedo. And yes, he was the deepest guy, but Caicedo was doing the 6 stuff just 20 yards further up. And it was filtering through, so he was having to do less. And I think that's the plan that we're still trying to find. We just need to find the guy who's going to do the Caicedo bits. Is it going to be Jones? Is it going to be Gravenberch? Is it going to be Szoboszlai? Ironically enough, Endo has probably been the most, the one that's worked the best for him in terms of that. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But I think when you bring Andre into that, then it's an opportunity to have a guy do the lone six stuff, but then there's also the opportunity to have people do pivots. So we have two very good, strong 1A options as a defensive midfield structure. So it's not just we need to rag this guy to death as we did with Fabinho.
I think there's something which we maybe haven't touched on yet. It's not so much a height thing. I think that when we talk about people maybe having their reservations around Endo, there's various reasons around that, I suppose, and McAllister in the six. I feel like there's a profile, and it's just a gnarliness, which like I really liked when we were linked to Ugarte. He went to PSG in the end. Obviously, everybody was buzzing for 24 hours about Caicedo, and I think the Andre thing is that's the thing that I think that we are missing. Not at all number six, not a holder kind of number six. We are too nice, I think, sometimes, and I think obviously you can't just have one narky fella because it'll just end up getting sent off all the time with these refs. But you know, we are.
We need angry young men.
We do, and I think probably having one of them who leads, a gnarliness leader
sets a tone of gnarl.
Yes, yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we need a gnarly cultural architect that will that other people will rub off on, and I do think it works like that. You can see that there's a thing going on with kind of like Trent and Szoboszlai, and not in a gnarly way, but there's something like that will you will see Darwin unlocking
Milner has a bit of
something
that.
long
Yeah,
dormant.
Milner has a bit of that, and
exactly.
that's
Come on and give someone a kick in the air.
Exactly, and it's Milner was one of those players that was brilliant at getting away with it, as Rodri has been for years, and all that's there's something there, I think, which and that's what excites me most, and I do think there is a strong chance of this being a January signing, which is not something that you kind of think very often, and it might be that it's not. I think he may end up being one for the future a little bit, as in next season, but you never know. But I just really like the idea of getting a grok in the camp.
I think just on a January signing points to the idea that the Brazilian season ends.
Yeah.
So this is for me, this is the key defining factor that Liverpool do not want to get into, because we could end up in the same situation next summer. So I think anyone who wants him, I think the time is now January to get him in. I actually thought that Liverpool might do a deal where they got him confirmed and then he finishes the season. That isn't the way in which it went.
Feels mad that they didn't really, in a way.
But you just never know who's having what argument where and what the conversation is.
Fluminense, he might have had strong indications that other people are going to come in January. So
we know Arsenal are interested.
He might be off to Arsenal. That's the problem, isn't it? Anyway,
let's finish by talking about the defender situation. In a sense, Neil, the conversation over what positions we go for in January, I think, ends up being hugely coloured by how lucky or unlucky you are within a department with injuries in the opening phase of the season. So, for example, we nearly lost Gakpo for a long time, and hopefully he's back within a week or two. But I could have seen, say his knee injury had been something cruciate type, which could have put him out for the season. We'd have then been another niggly hamstring away from only having three forwards. And I think we'd have gone into January going, fuck me, we needed to have replaced Firmino. The defensive situation is an interesting parallel case in point. In the summer, we looked at the loss of form and the fragility with injuries of Matip and Gomez and Canati to an extent, and went, in what universe do we not need to buy a defender here? Why? It's negligent they didn't buy a defender. Now, these guys are playing, albeit the minutes are being managed, and they're looking good. And this kid Kwanzaa's come through. So suddenly the defensive situation isn't the panic it felt like it was in August. I could go on and on. I mean, an injury to Szoboszlai might change the midfield situation. So where do you think the cookie is going to crumble in terms of Liverpool's priorities? Let's park the whole Salah thing for
I think the one thing that the defensive thing's done is it's allowed them, and I think they clearly made that decision with Kwanzaa and the fact that the manager has been proven. I didn't feel as though we had this another Joel Matip renaissance in us, and we've had one. So the manager's been proven right so far on that, because I don't think this is just even a conversation around fitness. I think it's actually a conversation around form. I think it's worth saying that much more so, I would argue, in defence than in any other area. For instance, if Gomez and Matip had stank the gaff out at this point, where this whole show has been about the defence, it's not just about fitness. Exactly. It's that as well. I'm about to have a short, sharp shock of what we do without Andy Robertson thrown in as well, which might open up a couple of questions, I think, quite quickly. Might not do, and I think that they might be more creative than people think at this stage around what the solution is to that, but we'll see.
You may be proved wrong for a third time, Neil, with a brilliant 4 weeks of Simicast.
I would love to be, given the importance of the next 4 weeks.
I know.
It would be nothing would make me happier. So I think, I think you're about to see a little bit of that within there as to how all of that plays out. I still feel as though I wouldn't. This is the problem. The problem with the manager, he was a wonderful, brilliant football manager, is he loves his people. So it wouldn't surprise me if he would love another year of Joel. A Joel Matip contract extension. Like right now, if you gave the manager complete agency to do that, he'd do it. I would still argue Liverpool are in a position of strength in that they've got one whose contract is about to expire. They can look and go and get another centre back off the basis of the fact that they know for certain one is what we can manage a situation where one leaves. So Quansah's around. Gomez is doing well, and we hope it's going to continue. Konate and Van Dijk, and if there's one who we think is really, really good and worth getting in at almost any age profile, we can do it off the basis of the fact that we can manage Joel out. The flip side of that is there's now all sorts of rumours that they're going to give Matip a new contract, and if they do that, I think they begin to just sort of box themselves off. You can't go into a season with 6 centre halves because they're never going to play. However much we're talking about the importance of the Champions League, so I think you can have a situation possibly where Matip's number 5, and that becomes tough. And Matip at the minute, I think they'll just be managing Konate into a run of form. And what I mean by that is, I think they'll be managing him into, we want you to play a lot of games in October, November, and December, and we've managed you into that. I don't think the manager is. I think if there'd have been games that they felt Konate has to play, he'd have played them, but they've done it a little bit differently. But I think that's your problem, and that's why but at the minute, it's also a position of strength. It means that if there's one they like in January, they can get one off the basis of the fact that they can move Joel along.
I think this is a very good point as well. As much as I've praised Matip this season for all of the stuff, I do feel like to say that this is going to be able to be extrapolated for a long period of time does feel a little bit like dodgy, to say the least. I don't think. I think it's almost as if we've kind of got away with this period, trying to turn it into something that it isn't, and. So having him around as a 5th option, yes, I think that works as well.
Sorry, Mo, but I think the key factor in how urgent we feel that the defensive recruitment isn't as much. Well, of course it's about Matip and it's about Gomez's continuing form being good, but Quansah is he the real deal or not? That is the big question. He's obviously done everything right so far, but there's a long way to go with that one.
But the thing is, though, we're not going to be able to definitively tell. I mean, okay, so if we can't definitively tell from the 10 to 15 games he's going to get this season, are we going to be able to definitively tell from a player playing for someone else?
I think 10 or 15, yeah, but we've only had 3.5 so far.
Well, this is the thing. I don't think that Matip... I agree with what Neil's saying about how Matip's going to come in. He's been used to kind of get Konate back up, and then we're going to be seeing less of him. I also think that we have to remember that Gomez is pretty much Trent's replacement here as well, particularly if we're looking at Bajcetic not being as in the squad or maybe even going out on loan. So there's going to be, if we're going to be using Gomez, I think more as a right back than a centre half in the second half of the season, personally. So then there may be more opportunities. You have to weigh that out with the fact that naturally a younger player is not going to get as many opportunities in the second half of the season if we're doing well and in competitions.
And don't have injuries.
But again, it's a decision that they're going to have to make based on what they've seen. And we are only judging on games. They're judging on training. And I think that Klopp does put a lot of weight on that. So if he sees him being able to combine with the players who he's going to be playing with, then I think that has a bit more weight than potentially someone else outside. I would do what Neil was saying and move Matip on and bring someone else in the summer, but I can also see a world where they don't.
Okay, but just thinking about January, the January requirement for a centre-half, staying on focus versus the August requirement, Adam.
Yeah.
There's a player I feel we've all sort of parked a little too readily here, and I think he's an important factor in midfield and defence, and that's Stefan Bajcetic. Yeah. Now, he did get a game, he's had a little setback, but Klopp talked about it as though that's inevitable. Whilst I think it might be a good month before we see him again, I do think there's a chance he comes to the fore again. Now, Bajcetic is naturally a centre. Well, he spent a lot of his career as a centre-half, has already played a full game, I think, at least half a game for Spain as a under-21s as a centre-half. He's played a game for Liverpool as a right-back, hybrid right-back this season. He's obviously a player with enormous potential. He is potentially another body in that pool of defenders. And that might affect thinking, going with Mo's vibe of, go work with what you train with as much as going to the market.
Yeah, it didn't particularly go that well with him playing right back, did it? That was the only thing I liked
him in that game.
Did you? I felt like it was probably one of the most interesting lineup decisions of the season. That
Yeah, it was.
seeing him pop up there, and in my mind, it hadn't particularly gone that well that first half that he played in. But yeah, I mean, I think Neil's probably right to say that we shouldn't be expecting tons this season. I'd be really surprised if he went out on loan, if I'm honest. But I think I'm not expecting a massive amount, in the same way as I'm sort of not expecting much at all from Thiago, and anything's a bonus. So we have earned ourselves through sort of not predictable good fitness from some players who haven't been fit for the last few years. Matip and Gomez particularly. I think I do have a little sort of ongoing concern around Konate, to be honest, in terms of his fitness and sort of how long he seems to come back. He needs to come back after his sort of smaller injuries. I was talking about it before, so the Kwanzaa thing's so interesting to me because it makes, if we kind of circle back to the first things I was saying, what I was feeling like in the summer. What I was feeling like in the summer around centre-halves was, are we insane? What is going on? Why are they saying Colwill or no one? Kwanzaa makes it make sense. But I mean, and that's why I asked you before we started the show, Rob, whether anybody had even mentioned him on a gutter show. If any of your guests said, is Kwanzaa...
Not before the pre-season games.
But yeah, so after the pre-season games, you mentioned it, I think, Rob, you were saying. So that Kwanzaa's appearance makes that make sense a bit to me. So I think we're in okay shape, but one more injury probably makes a fool out of that comment, and I wouldn't be surprised if we are revisiting what we were saying in the summer in the not too distant future, because we are, we probably are one sort of centre half or Trent injury away from thinking we should have done a bit more. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that we get one in January. Defenders seem easier to buy, in general. You could just we just pop up and buy one.
Go on, Neil.
My thing is, I still think that they'll have a really strong watching brief on a couple that they were linked with a lot in the summer. So the lad who's at Iran, for instance, but the one I still think, Inacio.
But he just signed a new contract, didn't he?
He did, but it's still got a release in.
Yeah.
And
so
they're top of the...
Theate is and Hincapie is
yeah, but I think Inacio is dead interesting because he's playing every week. He's playing left side centre half in a 3, Sporting atop of the league, and they've only conceded 7 goals.
Yeah,
and I think and he's playing centre half next to Sebastian Coates. Now you can have your own view on Sebastian Coates, but that's who he's playing next to in there, and the top of the league. This is the league.
How old is he?
Benfica. He's about 33.
He's captain now.
Defensive wise, we're in a position which is not too bad because we're comfortable enough, but it's not like there's no room for one.
Yeah, and that's why. So I think, but what that means is, and this is the point of, when seasons are being built, the idea, for instance, if he's one that they're still watching, they're still loving what they're seeing at the minute, but Sporting aren't going to sell him though in January, and that becomes your thing.
I think a fascinating remaining 38 games lie ahead, and January will be interesting. I couldn't at this stage say whether I think we're going to do significant business in January or none at all, as is sometimes I won't. If you want to find out about more of this sort of stuff, you really do need to be subscribing to Tour Player and listening to the award-winning Transfer Gutter show, which comes at you from all angles and all the time, on and off. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Andy, for producing. And normal service will be resumed next week, won't it, Neil?
Absolutely.